My guest today has traveled 91 countries, while I got lost at IKEA last weekend. Clearly, one of us is better equipped with navigating the complexity of the world. Besides having a superior navigation skills, he is an international business strategist, mentor, investor, and advisor. He leverages technology to tackle significant challenges, enhancing impact and revenue for business globally. He is also the author of Agile Shepherd, right? And a co-founder of Narwhal Network Platform. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ethan Myers. Ethan, how are you doing?
I am wonderful, and I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, good. Tell me, how is Slovenia treating you so far?
Slovenia is treating me very, very well. I just got to go see fish with arms and legs.
Awesome.
And I got to go see one of the largest holes in the world. So down in the cave, and it's beautiful. It's mountainous. The people are nice. The food is lovely, and I get to have great conversations. I love Slovenia.
All right, awesome. So let's continue our conversation then. Tell me, how do you define effective leadership in today's fast-paced, technology-driven world?
Yeah, it's a hard thing, right? Because this concept of leadership sometimes is ethereal. It's ill-defined. What is a leader? How do you get better at it? But there is a science and there is some definition, right? So what is a leader ultimately responsible for? First of all, even before we go back to that, what exactly is a leader? Because you can be a leader at any level. So you could be a leader of the company, but you can be a leader of your division. You can be a leader of your team. Even within a project, you can be asked to lead. So let me separate two things. One aspect of leadership is a role, and one is an activity. In both cases, there are some specific similarities. So to be a good leader, you have to be really good at communication. And the reason for that is you're setting an agenda and letting people know what they need to go hit, the targets. You're literally defining success for an organization, a project, or an activity. You are persuading/influencing people to be able to be their best and reach their own individual goals and the corporate goals. That's what a good leader is supposed to be doing. A leader who neglects the business in favor of the individual risks becoming, not profitable and going out of business. A leader who prioritizes the company and not the people risks losing their people and being unable to participate. So in my opinion, a really good leader in the 21st century is able to help the company and the individuals achieve their objectives. So if you break it down further, what does a leader do? A good leader sets the agenda of a project, company, organization, sets what the goal of success is, unblocks people and issues from getting in the way of success, and galvanizes essentially a community to reach a success.
So if I understand you right, the leader needs to have a vision, because without the vision, the leader is just somebody in a company, let's say, just somebody who is bossing people around.
Well, yeah, especially today, you start bossing people around, they're going to find another job. It's never been easier, honestly. It's never been easier to go find a different job, form a fractional or portfolio career, which I know we're going to talk about later, to start your own business, to do different things. So that's the first of all. But second of all, when we talk about vision, yes, but I don't want anybody listening to get scared of what that means. For instance, right now, we're sitting down having a conversation for a podcast. At the very least, you have to have a vision to understand what a successful podcast. And you've set up cameras and you've set up mics and we're sitting down and we're talking. That's enough sometimes. So we're not talking about, when we talk about grandiose vision, no, it's literally, what are we doing here? What are we doing here, and what does success look like? In this case of this podcast, it would be that the audio is recorded. Hopefully the conversation is interesting and it eventually gets published. That's as much leadership as any other activity within an organization. So that's why leadership is both, it's an activity and a role, and you have to be able to combine both. So yes, it's incredibly important to essentially define success. So there's a term I like to use called backcasting. It's the opposite of forecasting. It's a tool that a lot of futurists and a lot of other people use, and the idea is you start from the end and work backwards and say, what do I need to achieve? Good leaders are able to do that.
This is really interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the at least the way I was brought up was you think about a challenge that you have, and then you try to like figure out the steps that you need to do to achieve this to conquer this challenge. But if I understand you right, you're doing it the other way around, right? So you are I don't know how to say it in English, like deconstructing the challenge.
Yes.
And, yeah.
Yeah. And that's partly, and that's what I talk about a little bit about the book in Agile Shepherd. And I talk about there's two very distinct ways to build right now. So we manufacture ideas, thoughts, services, right? Now, when you manufacture things, you can set out a process, do one, then do two, then do three. You can imagine to produce a car, right? We've got to go mine some metal, and then we've got to forge that metal into a frame. And it has to be done in that order because you can't do it in any other order. But many of us now, including myself, and I've been in the knowledge economy for basically my whole career, we don't manufacture things, we manufacture ideas. And when you manufacture ideas, it's a different process. And oftentimes going specifically linear, as we talked about, doing this construction manner in a linear fashion, often yields worse results. Because we build and build and build, but we're building something that requires a little more creativity, a little more innovation, a little more maybe hasn't been done before. So the reason why I like backcasting as a tool, or deconstructionism, is trying to imagine what success looks like and then saying, how do we build towards that? We keep the end in mind as we construct forward. So it's actually kind of like a bridge that's built from sort of like both sides. So what we look to for our leaders, when we talk about vision, we look to our leaders for vision. So what is that vision? It could be, again, as small as a single activity or as grand as a big startup trying to tackle a really big problem. But in both cases, they require the same thing. Success defined. And that is the ability to define success and then galvanize and communicate it clearly to a group of people in such a way that success becomes a shared success. That's most of leadership.
Interesting. Can you share, like, do you have from the top of your head a leader that inspired you?
I've been very lucky in my career. I've worked with extraordinarily good leaders and a couple bad ones, and from all of that, I've learned. So I'll give you a couple quick stories, right? So when I was going through college, I worked for one of the winningest basketball coaches of all time. Her name was Pat Summitt, and I would watch her on the court, and I got to occasionally have breakfast with her, so I get to occasionally ask her questions. And one of the most important lessons I learned from her as a leader is economy of words. So she was basically saying when she's on the court and she's giving a corrective action to one of her players, she's trying to use as few words as possible and be as direct as possible. And what she said is, for me, it's Thursday afternoon. For her, the player, it's my coach just yelled at me. And I've applied that a lot. When I became CEO, for me, it's just Tuesday at 3:00. But for my employee, he just rode the elevator with me. So when you understand that and respect other people, like the idea was be careful with your words and make sure to basically maintain positive communication. And also what she also taught me in that moment was how important it was to role model. I had another boss a couple years later that was incredibly kind to me. I was going through some difficult personal situations. I had to take care of my son on my own. And he would let me leave early. And this was in a very high-pressured job. And it showed me the importance of taking care of the whole person. Because I will tell you, I don't know if I've ever worked as hard for anyone as I did for the person that took care of me. And when you hire the right people, you hire the right colleagues, and you take care of them in the right ways, they'll take care of you. And so to me, that was incredibly inspiring leadership. I would say on the other side of it, that you didn't ask, the worst leaders that I've ever had were the ones that put themselves first, even before the company. It was all about them and their ego, and it was uninspiring. In one particular job, we were making high salaries, so we kind of just dealt with it, but no one liked it, and everyone basically counted the time to leave, and I can't even imagine the loss of productivity and innovation that resulted from that, because I'm not bringing my best self to work. No one is. And so it's really, give people a vision that's bigger than yourself. And one of the most important concepts I talk about in the book is servant leadership. Mm-hmm. We're there to serve. A good leader serves their people first, then the organization, and the customers, and finally the investors. Mm-hmm. And it's in that order, because good people will come up with great ideas that will take care of they'll put the company in the right way, that will take care of exceptional customers. Mm-hmm. And if all that's done, we create value and we return money to our investors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is, it's really inspiring listening to you, because I am sometimes under the impression that the world is the other way around, like when we are talking about huge companies or, they're always trying to satisfy the investors and trying to, usually money is the main motivator, let's say, and what do you get if you go this route? Well, people don't mean anything anymore, and that can be that's a quick way to build a culture of just not being successful. I mean, you can be successful if you have a good product or service, or like if you're the only one in the world who's doing something. But I don't think that people are going to come into their workplace with energy and having wanted to be there and so on and so forth. But I want to circle back a little bit. You're talking about how people are important and how leaders are serving people in the first place. But tell me, how can efficient leader manage all these increasing demands in this day and age of flexibility of working hours, remote work options, higher salaries, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, but it's always been a challenge. So that's something to keep in mind. I mean, today's challenges will just give away to tomorrow's challenges. No, I mean, it is a requirement. A good leader in this particular way, I'm defining leadership as the person leading the company. You are required to understand and know and effectively listen to trends. Look, none of this stuff is easy, and that's what you learn pretty early on. None of this stuff is easy. And that's why backcasting to me is so important, because working backwards from the end is so critical to know what success defines. You were mentioning that people sometimes are seen as disposable, and that's true. That can be true in many organizations. Money's not a motivator. I don't believe that. And there's actually been a lot of psychological tests that have talked about that money is only a motivator for a certain point. Once you basically can afford to live in a house, occasionally go on vacation, things like that, giving you a lot more money for the most part for most people doesn't actually motivate them more. What they found, and the research is pretty clear on this, is that people look for purpose. People look for purpose. And what I found directly related to your question about, how does a leader effectively respond to trends? And I have one word: intentionality. So good leaders are forced to, and sometimes they should anyway, basically have opinions on things. So do you offer remote work for your employees? And that's a yes or no question. But there's a second question, which is why or why not? And I'm sorry, I'm going to sit here and say, I don't offer my employees remote work because no one else does is not a good answer. There are plenty of good reasons. There are plenty of good service jobs. Hotels can't work remote. Hospitals can't work remote. There are plenty of jobs that cannot work remote if we want. There are plenty of CEOs out there that believe, and if that's what they believe, that to get people together on a collaborative, collective basis is absolutely essential. Those are fine, because what that does is one of my favorite words in the English language is agency. I know if I go for a company and they're telling me I have to be in 5 days a week, they're setting that expectation and they're explaining to me what their reasons are. I can choose to take that job or not. I can choose to stay or not. They don't have to take away my agency, if that makes sense. So I think good leaders should respond to these trends by maintaining agency in their employees. And the way they do that, being a leader is tough. You're going to make tough decisions, but you can make the tough decision, explain your rationale, and then let the chips fall where they may, if you will. I've decided to go back to 5 days in the office. Here's my explained reasons. This is what's happening. And people can choose to stay or leave. I think it's those leaders that make decisions without giving their reason or their expectation. They don't attempt to take people along the way. That's when it almost always fails, if not in the short term, but certainly in the long term.
Yeah, I agree with that, actually. Do you find that, before you said that you don't believe that the money is motivator, are there any other benefits and activities that you find most effective in attracting and retaining talent?
So money is not a motivator, but it is a measuring stick.
Okay.
So money is a great metric, especially in a capitalist society, an entrepreneurial society. Money is a phenomenal measuring stick. So you can sit there and say, I want to double growth this year, and you actually have quantitative numerical numbers by which you can measure. So when I say the motivation may be hitting the goal, and this is where it comes back to intentionality. If the goal is reasonable, I've set up a good company, I have a lot of good people, there's no reason we can't double our business. Let's double our business. It's going to be great for our shareholders, but honestly, we're ready for it. Let's do it. And if people buy into that mission, chances are you're going to be able to double your business. We've all had the boss that makes an arbitrary goal. They're asking me to double revenue, but I have no more people and I have one sales guy and these things aren't working. What's going on, right? And it seems almost irrational. So, just to circle back on that, money is a great measuring stick and it's a great tool and it's absolutely necessary. And the thing is, there are great stories. Southwest Airlines had this great story. It was back in the economic crisis 15 years ago. And fuel prices had gone up, something like that had happened. And they had to really cut back and they didn't want to lay off anyone. And so they asked their staff for ideas. And some of their staff said, well, how much are we paying for landscaping? And they said, several thousand per month. And basically executives volunteered to mow the grass at headquarters, not for very long, for a few months, but in order to save jobs and layoffs. You want to be a good company, start trusting your people to solve the issue. Everyone should know when they come to work, we have to be profitable. If we can't be profitable, if we can't return a profit, we're not going to be in business. So trust them and engage them. So how can we double our business? Our profits then, how can we help? So it's less about order in the sky. So when we talk about motivating individuals, which is the root of your question, for me, a lot of it is purpose and agency. The good creative people in the world want purpose and agency, and they also want support to bring their full selves to work. Now, giving agency doesn't mean not having expectations. In fact, I argue it's the exact opposite. I could come to you and say, next quarter, I need you to double your sales. Tell me what prevents you from doing that. We have a conversation. Maybe we come up with a goal of 80% increase. You now own that goal. It's not one way. Good companies that I've seen in the world, that's how they do it. You have to get somewhere, but it's at least a little more collaborative because you get somebody on board with that's their goal. That's not just what my boss told me, or that's not what some shareholder investor living in another country wants, but that's a reasonable goal that I should be able to attain, and it'll give me a sense of purpose. It'll give me a sense of accomplishment. You're much more likely to achieve those goals. And almost more importantly, if you don't achieve the goals, you're much more likely to know why. When you just give somebody a task and they fail, they're not going to tell you every step of the way. So, we talk about how fast-paced business is. You need desperately, especially in the world of marketing, especially in the world of sales, you desperately need information. There's a saying in investment banking in New York, it's like a $10,000 mistake at 10 o'clock is a $100,000 mistake at noon. And so this culture is not just feel good. It's actually, I believe, an imperative necessity in a world that moves so fast so that you can effectively have the decisions to be able to flex and change as needed. And if you don't create a culture of at least bare trust, and we're not saying niceness. There could be a very simple, you pay me a lot of money and I do your job, and that could be the basis of our trust. So we're not talking about anything feel good here. We're talking about the basics of treating people with respect and agency. What you're going to end up with is you're going to have information hoarders. I'm not going to tell you what's going wrong or whatever because you're putting so much pressure on me to succeed. But the problem is your strategy was wrong. And now as a leader, you're not getting that information. So to successfully motivate people, you give them agency, you give them purpose, and you give them support, and you give them clear objectives. And employing colleagues on the other side of this, You're there. You're there to make the business money. Like, this is the exchange that we do, right? So let's not hide behind that. And in fact, let's do the opposite. What do you need to succeed? What ideas do you have that can help us achieve our goals or better? So that's when I say that I think the best organizations in the world run this a bit more collaboratively, and that's how they attract the best talent. And the best talent wins.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. How do you see technology helping in enhancing leadership and employee engagement?
Yeah, I mean, so to me, technology is a tool. So I believe that all technology can be grouped into one of two tools, one of two buckets. All technology. So either technology enhances a human ability, so a gun is a stronger fist, an airplane is simply a faster way to run, or it organizes information into effective decision making. Let's not take the human out of it. There's a lot of conversations about AI. AI is great. AI helps us write better. AI helps us effectively manage information. But there are still humans there in the room. So I remember I was on a road trip once, and the person I was with was asking me, she's older, and she was just like, what do we do before smartphones? And I actually thought about it to answer the question. And I said, on this particular day, we did 5 activities. And if I didn't have the smartphone to help me plan, I probably would have done 1 or 2. I would have planned out that activity 2 months ago, circled it on a map. And we would have done 1 or 2 things because that's the only thing we had ability for. So one of the things that technology is really good at is helping to optimize the use of our time. It helps us do more with less. So in terms of leaders, we can use technology in a wide variety of ways. Everything from making sure that we get the pulse of employee sentiment, colleagues, to organizing information, to better CRMs. That's basically raising flags and issues. I mean, as a leader, one of the biggest challenges is knowing where to channel and put your energy into what's needed most. So technology can be a great tool to assist you. That does not, however, replace the good instincts necessary for a good leader. Or I firmly, by the way, do not believe that leaders are born. I believe they're trained, and I believe they're built over time. And I believe that anyone can and will be asked to lead at some point in their careers. So a good leader can use technology to make more effective decisions, to help them with priority and making sure they're focusing their time on what's most essential. But at the end of the day, I got to, very early on in my career, I got to ask this very high up media executive, and I said, tell me about your day. And, he thought about it, and he's like, I basically make 200 to 300 decisions a day, and about 2 or 3 of them are highly impactful. The other ones are very important, but 2 or 3 are highly impactful and will affect things maybe for months, years ahead of time. And then as I've gotten even up the chain, those numbers actually reduce. The more team you have. When you're CEO of a company, you might make 3 to 5 decisions a day. And some of them are hugely impactful, like shutting down that office in that country or moving into that other country. I mean, those are impactful decisions that affect people's lives. The moment you make that decision as a CEO, somebody's packing, somebody's moving, somebody's telling their kids that they're no longer in that school anymore. Think about the power that has, right? And so good leaders should have the people and the staff and the data around them to make the best decision possible and to make sure they're prioritizing their information in the best way possible.
Yeah, before, when talking about technology, of course, now we are living in an age of AI. Just today,
we do.
I heard that Apple is going to be integrating AI into their newest software, which is going to completely change the game. Why? Because the M1 processors are capable of generating and using AI internally. So basically, you don't send the information out. Everything is happening on your device, which is good for privacy and so on and so forth. But I'm also thinking from the perspective of a good leader. AI is going to change the way we work, the way we do things. What do you say about all those people who are saying that certain industries or certain sectors are going to be closed down, or people are going to lose jobs because AI is going to replace them? How do you see this?
So we've seen this before, in my opinion, and there are those that will tell you that AI is so fundamentally different from what we've seen before, and I'm not sure if I fully buy that. You know, we've seen seismic shifts. I mean, you go back to the telegraph. We had no way. I mean, in the 1860s, we used to run a letter across the United States by horse. So the idea that a message can be transmitted essentially at the speed of electricity, the speed of light, is just unbelievable to understand. AI will be transformative. It is one of the most transformative technologies that we've ever built, and that is true. And it will change things. First of all, I think it's going to change things a little slower than everyone thinks. I think everyone thinks it's going to change everything in 6 months. Well, ChatGPT's been out over a year. The world is still moving along. Yeah, there's a couple. You know, I've seen a couple jobs for like prompt engineer, but other than that, it's not going to change anything. So first of all, these things take a lot longer. I mean, we saw this. You know, I joked in the pandemic. It's like, where are all the 3D printers? Because, man, we're locked down. We can't leave our houses. If you had a 3D printer, you'd be downloading all sorts of stuff all day. That's how you'd be shopping. But guess what? And where were the drone deliveries? I didn't get my fast food delivered by drone in 2020. Wouldn't that have been the watershed moment for drone delivery? By the way, drone delivery is coming at some point, probably. I mean, there's separate issues, which is it can't carry that much weight, which is why they're using it a lot for drug deliveries. But the point was, these things actually take a lot more time than people realize, and especially since there's a lot of inertia with the way the world is. So let me preface that by saying, you know, you're not losing your job tomorrow. Second of all, through all these technological waves of innovation, there are jobs that go away. Eventually, there was a telegraph operator that went away. That was the last. I was reading that the last, at least in the United States, I can't speak about the world, like live telephone operator, the kind that switched the little lines, they had a job until 1991 in Hawaii.
Okay. Didn't know that.
I believe there's still one existing typewriter factory in the world that still makes typewriters new. There's a great article in the New York Times years ago, and it was basically like, we have never retired any technology that we've ever built. Basically, there's still tribes living in Amazon, using Bronze Age technology tools. Like, you know, you travel across Europe and you go from the 21st basically back to the 19th, 18th century, depending where you are. So that's first of all. We're a lot slower than we think. Andre and I, my co-founder at Narwhal, were just looking at a article about ChatGPT usage is actually much lower than ChatGPT would let you know. So that's first of all. Now, that being said, it will change things. There will be jobs that will go away 100%. For example, myself, I'm using copy editors a lot less than I did before. I'm using graphic designers less than I was before. So that's absolutely shifting. But then I was at a tech week in New York City last week, and I met someone who's making primarily their money as an AI artist. They wouldn't have been able to operate 5 years ago. So a couple things. Number one, I believe that certain jobs will go away and certain new jobs will show up. That's just what happens with every technological revolution. And I think this thing will happen, while fast in relative terms. It's not going to happen overnight. You're not losing your job tomorrow. This thing is going to take 5, 10, 15 years even to cycle out. The other big trend that I see, and it's why I started Narwhal Network, is there's something called a portfolio career. And it's this idea where people hold multiple jobs. And I think what AI is going to do, because it's going to make you very efficient at what you do, you're able to effectively manage technology, tools, and information in a very efficient manner. You're going to be able to hold more than one job, and in fact, it will keep your interest. I remember it was, 10, 12 years ago, I was just chatting with a colleague of mine. A normal job is a normal, 9 to 5, 40-hour week job. And he just turns to me, because he would do this. He's Dutch, and he would just say things very bluntly every once in a while. I was like,
that's how Dutch people are.
That's how Dutch people are. And he was just like, Ethan, he's like, people only do 2 to 3 hours worth of work a day. The rest of the time is eating lunch at your desk, gossiping and answering emails. But substantive, think about it. I have to write a report, and I'm going to think about writing the report. I'm going to write about writing the report. I'm going to block out the calendar. But the actual writing of the report only takes a couple hours. So, and I think AI is actually going to accelerate that. So companies, the idea of a 40-hour work week, by the way, this is an artifact from the Industrial Revolution. We've already been fighting against it. The French are down to 35 hours. We've passed all these, we've passed all these overtime laws because we don't want people to work, 50 hours and 60 hours a week. But the reality is the opposite's happening, which is many of us are actually able to create the value that a company needs in 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 hours a week. And in fact, part of the problem is companies are struggling how to deal with this, right? So we have this freelance economy, but the freelance is quite unfulfilled because people actually do want, if we go back to an earlier part of the conversation, they want purpose. What I think AI is going to shift is that it's going to enable people to assume a lot more part-time jobs, longer term with purpose. And that's going to be a dignified form of employment. So I think a lot more people are going to embrace a portfolio career directly as a result of artificial intelligence.
Interesting. Tell me more about this portfolio career and the Narwhal Network, right?
Yeah, it's so fractionals have been around for a long time. It's existed within fractional CFO, fractional CMO. I've even seen fractional general counsel. Since COVID, I've seen a couple of huge shifts happen. First of all, COVID reminded us that we actually have agency. We have control of our lives. We don't have to actually accept what's been given to us. We can actually create our own lives. And that resulted in lots of people becoming either digital nomads or just reevaluating what they want to do with their lives and pursue happiness and purpose. So that's the first one. I noticed a couple trends where this concept of fractional. So fractional is just an idea of a company hiring you as a part-time. And to me, it's completely different than freelance and gig work, because a gig work or freelance work is just project. It's just you're used and abused for the hour or day rate that you're at. You're thrown away. You're not part of the company. You're used, and that's fine. And there's nothing wrong with them. I have freelance and projects. We all do. There's no issue with that. But it's not career. And so obviously full-time is full-time. We know what this is. This is true part-time work where it's an open-ended, long-term assignment where you actually do have some responsibility, authority, and ownership, which is quite different. And so I've seen this, like I said, in CFO and CMO. What I started seeing about a year and a half ago was the extension of fractionals all the way down to the titles. All the way down. So I started seeing fractional social media managers, fractional accountants, all sorts of this. And this was a push against the freelancing gig. In the United States, 1 out of 4 people work in the gig economy or have a gig job. And most people are very unhappy with this. So it was kind of a response back like, I want purpose. I want to be with a company for a long time. So the second part of it that I noticed was people were starting to be given equity and long-term incentive plans. I had a friend of mine that was hired as a chief revenue officer, and he was given basically a percentage of the revenue that he would generate above like last year's sales. So it's like, okay, this is really interesting. This is a new form of work. About 3 centuries ago, we innovated, one of the biggest innovations of capitalism, when we freed capital. So capital used to be locked in your town, your country, and often within the farm agricultural fields. And we actually found a way to be able to make it fungible and to be able to trade and free up and make capital mobile. And when we made capital mobile, we invented things like stock exchanges, investment banks, and all the other modern tools that we have, because we capital was just like labor, was stuck to a geographic area and no longer. It invented the modern capitalist system that we had. I believe that we're going through a similar revolution within labor right now. We're freeing up labor from the location that it's at, and we're making labor completely flexible across all spheres. So because of that, I decided to put my energy into Narwhal Network. So it's a little bit of a joke, but it makes me happy because in startup land, you're always chasing unicorns, and unicorns are mythical creatures. So we said, stop chasing legends and start hiring them instead. Start working with them. So we call our experts, our fractionals, if you will, narwhals, because they are truly unicorns, but they're actually real. So narwhals, for anybody that doesn't know, is a sea creature with a big horn. It's a tooth that sticks out of their head and looks like a unicorn, and it's called unicorn of the sea. And actually, I was just reading that back in the medieval times, people would sell narwhal tusks as unicorn horns.
Really?
And Queen Elizabeth I had it on her coronation. Ivan the Terrible apparently died with a narwhal tusk like crown on his head. Like these things they sold them as unicorns. So I was like, let's stop chasing legendary legends. Let's start actually doing well. And to me, it's like the same thing we've been talking about, which is people are where the value of a business is created. It's created by people for people. The more we realize that humans serving other humans is where all value is created in the world, the better off that we're all going to be. So I wanted to create Narwhal Network because I talked to a lot of these portfolio careerists, and they were quite isolated. They were alone from each other. They had to figure it out themselves. And I said, there needs to be a community and one place to be able to go for portfolio careerists to be able to find their next job, but find other portfolio careerists and also get benefits and services that they need to continue their career. So that's why I started Narwhal Network.
Yeah. Also, I mean, I see a lot of opportunity for creatives.
Huge.
In this Narwhal network. I mean, Andrei, my good friend, he explained to me and talked to me about it, and I was like, I want to be a part of this, you know?
Well, and that's the thing. I've talked to so many people, like even people full time, they're like, oh, I'll pick up a Narwhal part-time job at night or weekends. Purpose. The hardest part for me, so I've been a portfolio careerist my whole life. I didn't know these words. In fact, up until recently, I didn't even have the language to explain it. And partially because of this, I did not get the support that I needed. Even friends told me go get a traditional job. I had family members that like, what do you do for a living? I don't get it. I don't understand it. And from my eyes, it all made sense, but from other eyes. So one of the things that really motivates me on a daily basis is I want to normalize this, that this is a career just like any other career. And it's because work is evolving, because work is changing, because technology is evolving, technology is changing, because life is evolving, life is changing. And this is a direct response to that. And so I feel, I toyed around with it for a few months, and I finally felt that the universe compelled me. It said, I'm one of the only people in the world that's been doing this for so long. I've been doing this for over 15 years as a portfolio careerist. I've seen every single side of the entrepreneurial side, from corporate innovation, M&A activity, as an investor and a VC fund, as an entrepreneur. So I've seen it on every single side as a worker. So I've held, too many hats, but I can directly have empathy and relate with all the people out there just trying to make sense of their lives, especially in this, complex world. Labor and talent needs to be cross-border. Labor and talent needs to be flexible and mobile. Labor and talent needs to be driven to the problems that they are best suited to solve. That is when we will live in a better world, because the right talent solving the right problem will help us all move forward.
True, I agree. So tell me something, like from a creative point of view, like how is the Narwhal network different from a platform like Fiverr, let's say?
Yeah, I mean it's a fair question. Because these are all experts. These are all very specifically professional experts that have dedicated themselves to a portfolio career. Fiverr focuses, and Upwork and many of these others really focus on freelance and independent project gigs and consulting gigs. And these aren't. These are actual jobs. And one of the differences of Narwhal Network is also we help facilitate equity and long-term incentive plans. We know what it takes to be a portfolio careerist. And we've specifically built our platform around that specific need. There's no consulting on our platform. There's no freelance on our platform. We're happy if you get that. In fact, a really good portfolio career might include an occasional freelance or consulting job. We're very supportive of that, but that's not why we exist. We exist to match talent with need, to match exceptional experts from around the world with companies that want long-term authority, ownership, and leadership in a specific area. So for that reason, I believe that we're different, and we've talked to enough narwhals to know that they don't really have a home, and we're building them a spiritual and philosophical home, and that's our purpose in life.
Awesome. That sounds really good, actually. Like I'm really looking forward to this
So
project to become alive. Okay, Ethan. One last question before I let you go. What do you think? I mean, what is the future? What is the future of leadership going to look like in next decade? What do you think?
I mean, there's what I think it will look like and what I hope, right? So there's a difference. Life moves slow sometimes. True and good leadership is actually shared and much more mobile than we think it is. Empowering your people and your colleagues to assume leadership roles, maybe within certain activities, I think has to be the future, because I think that's how you're going to get the best, the brightest, the most innovative outcomes that you could possibly get. So if I think about what a shared future, I hope that more and more leaders become servant leaders. I remember the first time I became CEO, I asked a friend of mine, I was going through a particularly difficult issue. And I said to him as a half joke, and I said, should I just be a jerk? And I have a really good friend because he actually gave it serious consideration. And he's a little older than me, but he's like, he's seen business across like 2.5, 3 decades. And he says, he really, there was like a nice 20-second pause, and he goes, over the long history of my career, I've seen fewer and fewer jerks. They're becoming rarer and rarer, and that's why we hear about them more and more in the news, because they're the exception. They're exceptional because they're not like the norm. Over my career, I have seen more people embracing servant leadership as a way of motivating people. So my hope is, as we move over the next 10 years, that we see a lot more people embracing servant leadership and realizing that people are where the value comes from, and when we treat them right. Now, the other side of it has to happen too, because leadership and colleagues is kind of a balance. If you have too strong of a leader, if you will, they're a jerk leader and nobody likes working for them, and you feel bad. On the other side, you could take advantage or not have very clear objectives and goals. So it needs to be a nice collaborative balance of forces, because a real leadership, as a leader, I always consider myself just one of the colleagues. I have a different job. My job is to galvanize the community, bring the resources into the business that it needs in order to operate, and I need to choose what success looks like. And that's essentially what my job is. Mm-hmm. And you have a different job, and you have a different job, and this colleague has a different job. So when I think about the future of leadership, I think about more servant leaders, more people recognizing the value of people, more collaboration, and more shared responsibility.
Again, this sounds really nice. I hope this is going to come to fruition.
Well, it's just good business. At the end of the day, if we are an economy where we manufacture ideas, where do ideas come from? They don't come from, they can come from individuals, but it needs a group or team to succeed and to execute. When we manufactured things, you could have a dictator boss with a process that was written by a bunch of management consultants and then force everyone to comply. And in some fields, you may still need that. Mm-hmm. But in fields that sell ideas and information and knowledge, we need to tap into the collective wisdom. My vision on Earth is I want to scale collective wisdom. Narwhal Network is part of that mission. So is the advice and mentor work that I do. But when a good leader, they share their collective wisdom so that you have it now and you could spread it too. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, is what I would hope for the future of leadership, because it's also just good business.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Is there anything else you would like to share with us?
No, I appreciate everyone. Go to Narwhal Network and check us out and sign up for us. And you could also check out my book at agileshepherd.com. And I just really appreciate being here in Slovenia and talking to your audience about these important issues. And I guess the only thing I'd say is I presented one perspective. You have your own. Share, talk, teach each other. If we really want to create the future, I think the most important tool that we have ever created in the history of humanity to shape and create a different future than our current present is story, is narrative. So you don't have to agree with me. Great. Don't. Let's talk about it. No, write a comment. Teach others. Have meaningful, substantive conversations about the world in which we want to create. Maybe one day we'll actually create it.
Awesome. Ethan, thank you.
Thank you so much.